sugar plum, well, I would love you forever. From your love, I'd never run. And if I was your little sweetheart, and you were.
So congratulations on the new album, the Strawberry Mansion, which, from what I understand, speaking of Pennsylvania, is kind of an ode or a reference to something in Philadelphia. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a neighborhood in Philadelphia that my grandfathers are from.
And why did that inspire you to name the album after?
Name the record after it.
Yeah.
One, it's a great name, Strawberry Mansion.
That's true.
And two, it's a place that I heard about a lot growing up. I was very close with my grandfathers, and they would tell us these amazing stories of. I sort of liken it to like urban Huck Finn characters. That's the way it kind of hit me, and that I imagined it. And yeah, they would just tell my brother and I all these wonderful stories of when they were kids running around in this little neighborhood called Strawberry Mansion. And they were two of my best friends in the world.
Right.
And they're no longer here in a physical plane, but I feel them around me a lot.
Right.
And during the writing of this record, it was kind of was going through a bit of a healing, and a bit of, personal kind of finding myself again, awakening again. And in that, I feel those old men around me and guiding me.
Right.
So it's tough to put these things into words, because you could do it, but it's not totally doing it justice. When some of these things kind of live in an unsayable land, as I know you can understand.
Yeah, I understand. I think I know where you're coming from. But you're not in Philadelphia. You're in Nashville. Is that correct?
I've been in Nashville for almost a decade. Yeah, I left Pennsylvania when I was 18.
Right.
I'm like 107 now, so
Yeah,
I left
gotcha.
a while ago. But my mother and my grandmother are still there in the house that I grew up in. And pre-COVID, obviously, we would go back all the time for shows every year. And in this last year of lockdown and a slower pace, I have taken the car and gotten my test and drove straight there to spend a little time with the ladies.
Very good. And Nashville's been having a bit of a time of it in the last few months as well. I mean, you've had an explosion, a tornado in the past.
We've noticed.
Yeah. I've been talking to a lot of people in Nashville and getting everybody's perspective on it. So I guess I'd be interested in yours.
I think the whole country, the whole world, and certainly Nashville, I can't speak for others here, but I think it's going to take a while to sink in and to see what the psychological, emotional ramifications of all of this are.
Yep.
There's, in my experience, there's been a lot of beauty and hope on a personal level inside my own home, inside my own creativity. But yeah, we had over a year ago, we had a tornado that ripped through the town, killed some people, decimated some neighborhoods. The street right next to mine, where I'm talking to you now, still looks like a tornado kind of just ripped through it.
Yep. And
a week and a half, 2 weeks later, the whole world was in COVID, lockdown and all of that. And then, of course, the bomb that happened downtown, as far as I know, it didn't, maybe it did hurt a few people. I don't want to say the wrong thing. It seemed like it just, I think people out there in Nashville and beyond are just so fragile right now and so kind of raw.
Yep.
That it's when I spoke to some people that their property or their physical being wasn't hit by it, it seemed like it penetrated some kind of emotional thing that was I don't know that I would want to compare it, but I lived in New York uh, during 9/11. I wasn't right there, but I was in New York, and there were certain eerie similarities of just confusion and deep hurt and fear.
Yeah, and now the songs that comprise the album were written kind of, what, if I'm not mistaken, like around March, or between March and May of the last year, which is kind of when all this stuff was happening.
Yeah, they all started to reveal themselves at that time.
Yeah, and yet you've tried to keep a sense of optimism about the record. So was that something that you had to kind of deal with internally?
You mean that you hear a sense of optimism in the record?
Yeah.
Well, I think I was born with some sort of infinite, some sort of, at times it feels large and at times it feels small, a well of hope and optimism mixed with a dose of cynicism and skepticism and sadness for my fellow brothers and sisters, the human race. These songs, man, I wasn't even writing this record. I didn't realize I was writing a record. I wasn't attempting to write a record, and I'm grateful for that. I think within that, there was less preciousness. Maybe there was less ego. There was less of that internal critic's voice that all of us, I think, have one to some extent. I hadn't written or finished a song in a long time. I had resorted back to some unhealthy habits, which was, in retrospect, it's very easy to see, was blocking my source to my creative, drive or whatever. And I came back to Nashville to come home and to try and get healthy again. And then there was a tornado, and then there was a plague, as we all know, and I sing about it on the record. I don't know that I was sitting there writing to connect the dots in any way or to bring optimism. It was my own process. They were just songs that were coming to me as I was sitting on my couch, taking a shower, lying in bed. And so they were helping me. And now that I have a record, I could see that there's optimism in there, and I'm glad that there is, because until it ain't over until it's over, and it ain't over. We're still here.
And when you say you have a record, you actually kind of have two records here. I mean, it's a double album. There's a lot of songs. Did that surprise you that you were going to be so productive?
Yes. I don't know if in like digital platforms it's expressed as a double album or not, because I've seen some people say that. It's just meant to be one album.
Right.
In its physical form, it's one album. There's a ton of songs on it. However, they're short. And yes, it did. I was in awe of the amount of songs that were showing up, particularly because there hadn't been songs showing up in a while. And I felt sort of cut off from my creativity for a little while. So yeah, it was a beautiful wave came through and allowed me to ride it. So that's a beautiful thing.
Right. So maybe we can touch on a couple of songs just to kind of flip through and get a feel for how you're feeling about them now. It's summer here in New Zealand, so I'd like to hear about Summer Days. I went to the beach yesterday, believe it or not.
You bastard.
Thank you.
It's sunny here. It was snowing just yesterday.
Right.
Summer Days is...
You reference New Jersey in there.
Yeah. How do I answer it concisely without beating around the bush? So, so I'd been out in California for 8 months or so. I was trying to finish another record that continued to elude me. Right. I've been sober for about 7.5 years, up until I was no longer sober, and I had gotten prescribed some medication for what they call an anxiety disorder.
Got some money in my pocket,
got nowhere to go. Didn't make my bed this morning, didn't even come close. There's a woman who adores me, but she's so far away. Another summer's coming towards me, gonna be some lonely summer days. Sometimes I miss New Jersey.
Right,
And
right.
That wasn't a real smart move for me, and I kind of knew it at the time that I was getting myself into that. But I was sort of desperate for relief and lazy in my efforts to find relief in something else other than a bearded professional who would prescribe me some kind of drug.
Right.
And that led, as it does for me, very quickly to an addiction to this stuff, which that lasted several years and got really bad at the time that I was out in California and trying to finish this record and kind of looking for myself everywhere but within myself, and medicating myself, let's just say more than was prescribed.
Gotcha.
And at the end of that year, a dear friend of mine who is like a brother to me, and we work a lot together. He's a great videographer and photographer. He came out to take the road trip back to Nashville with me, and shoot some footage for what was going to be this Lost at Last Volume 2. The last record prior to Strawberry Mansion is called Lost at Last Volume 1.
Right.
Volume 2 is the one that I wasn't able to finish or sort of wrap my mind and soul around while I was out there for several reasons. And my boy Joel, he did not know the shape that he was going to find me, and I wasn't being honest or open about where I was. And I don't know that I even knew entirely where I was, or that it would be so visible to somebody who's known me for a long time but hadn't seen me in a while. And he came out to California to take this trip back. And along the way, I was trying to, as a lot of people who struggle with addiction do, I was trying to beat it on my own. Right. I was trying to wean myself off of all of this medication. And I started taking some other shit as well. And there's a reaction that one has that's highly unpleasant, as I'm sure you know. And the addiction thing it's just a creature that I can't beat unless I can't control it. A lot of us try to control it. I've tried for years, and whether it be drink or drugs, it gets the best of me. Right. And then I'm just blocked from the source, from anything that's divine in this world. And the irony in it is that I think a lot of folks take these things to find access to that divine spirit, right? Of their creativity, people feel, I certainly have felt and still do at times, very uncomfortable or anxious, hard to be within my own skin at times. And then you reach for this other thing to medicate you or to help you, which at first it works, and it's right. And it's gonna be a lot of fun, and eventually it devours some of us. Yeah. And so he found me in a state of being devoured, and I could see it in his eyes. And it was a tough trip back from Los Angeles to Nashville. We never even spoke about medication or that I'd been on this stuff or drugs or addiction. I don't think he could even exactly process what the fuck, excuse my language, what was going on. And right. When we got back to Nashville, he had found some, the pills were falling out of my pocket. He'd found some in the car. He'd been like, here, I guess this is yours. I guess I'm giving it back. And it's sad, but it brought me to where I'm at now. So like the record, there's hard shit, but there's forever hope in it, and a lot can change in a little bit of time.
Yep.
And when I dropped him off at the airport back in Nashville after this sort of really rough trip, and he was looking at me like he didn't know who I was, and I just bawled. I dropped him off and I cried. I called on my way home. I looked up some treatment center.
Yep.
And within the next couple of days, I had called my mother, who I'm very close with, my small team, musical team, my manager and stuff,
Yep.
and went to get some help. And so the song, if I'm being real with you, is about finding myself in this a new place, being at home, starting to feel myself again. And then, of course, this slowing down of a pandemic and the whole thing, running from, it's cliche, but you've heard it, we've all heard it said, like, are you running toward or are you running from?
Right.
And in my life, I've done a lot of both, but I've gotten them confused because there's always another tour.
Yeah.
If I'm single, I'm always hopeful that there's another relationship, drugs and alcohol. So it's finally at the age that I find myself doing some of the things that I hadn't done, and trying to find some of that, of what I have sought externally. And at the end of the day, brother, it's an inside job, and you could run from it for your whole life. But your
one thing, when you talk about pills and alcohol and whatever, I mean, I come back to the States from time to time, and I'm amazed at the bombardment of the pharmaceutical industry as far as the advertising on commercial television. I mean, they're selling pills left, right, and center at everybody. How does that have an effect on someone like you when you're going through this stuff and you're just like, you turn on the TV and it's like, take this.
Well, I don't have TV at home, so it doesn't.
Well, that's probably wise.
But I can separate my own issues with the issue that is a vaster one for a country, which is, I wouldn't call that many things evil. I think that shit is evil.
Yeah.
And we see the effects of it. It's really easy to see with like the opiate issue that we have in this country. But for me, growing up as like a kid, an artsy kid, but I didn't know I was an artsy kid because I was too young to know that, that I hadn't played it. So I was at that point, now, thank goodness some people applaud me and say, good job. Back then I was just getting in trouble, and I was just considered a troublemaker. And so they prescribe you medication for that. And so I grew up in a time where every other kid is prescribed legalized speed. I'll also say, I believe that that these things do help certain people.
Sure, of course.
It's not so black and white, but it's so overly prescribed. It's so dangerous. And in my experience, I do identify as an alcoholic and an addict, and quitting booze, years of drinking booze every single day and finally quitting that, as challenging as that was, I feel like the coming off of the prescription medication was a lot harder.
Right.
And I mean, that's just my experience, but I just think that it's really very strong stuff, these medications. It's highly addictive, particularly if you are, if you have those issues. And it can just lead to really, really bad shit. And I know from my own experience, though I don't blame it on the doctor, it's my own thing, and I have to take responsibility for that.
Sure.
Period. New sentence. This wasn't a psychologist who I had been talking to. This was a doctor who I paid the $100 or however much it was to sit there and talk to him for that hour. Told him that I have anxiety and a lifelong history of it. We talked for a little bit. He listed 5 to 7 pills for me to pick from. Right. I picked the one that I had taken recreationally, and there we were. Me driving to the pharmacy to start, which became, relapse. So I try to separate the two, because I'm just trying to deal with my own stuff and my own issues to try to live an expansive life as opposed to a suffocating one, because I have experience with both. But on a grand, that I know I'm rambling, but I will say, one of the kind of bottoms that I had during that relapse with prescription pills was I was in Norway,
Right.
and I had run out.
Oh.
I had run out because I was taking so much, and I got sick, and I realized, shit, I'm definitely addicted to this stuff. And I was in such kind of like agony that I somehow found a doctor in Norway. I showed up there, took a car, showed up, and they're like, oh my gosh, man, like, this is why we don't prescribe this. Like, we hardly prescribe these pills out here, except for the most extreme cases. And they gave me, of course, in Norway, it's like really beautiful, like a little glass vial with these pills in it. Yeah, so they gave me enough to get home, but they were like, man, when you get home, really, you talk to your doctor, try to get off this crap. And I know for myself, there's other ways, there's ancient ways, and they're ancient because they've worked for a long time. And again, only speaking for myself, of course. In this last year of just trying to connect with a community of other people who know the struggles of drinking and drugs well, speaking with a therapist, and, you know, like the wonders of diet and exercise and meditation. And I don't practice these things well all the time, but when I do, it does really help. And somebody like me, I'm kind of looking for an easy fix a lot, but I don't get fixed that way. So it's putting some work into it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, with everyone, because people are all over the world are going through the same stuff or similar, and it's great to hear how people are dealing with it. So, and being creative at the same time. So.
Well, in that process, my creativity came back to me. It's always a fear in getting sober twice. The main fear for me was, will I be able to write a song? Will I be creative? Ironic, because while I was going through all these, this issue with the pills, I couldn't finish a song. But when I quit it, I was like, oh my God, will I be able to write a song? And then, it took a little bit, but my creativity came back more than I had experienced it in my life. Yeah.
Right. Now we got to wrap up in a few minutes, but I just want to touch on one more song, if we can, just to wrap it all around. A tune called Last One Standing, which to me felt very kind of Dylan-esque in his like desire mode. And I was wondering if that was something that you kind of touched into.
Sat back and wonder the spell that I'm under, all for the one I desire. Nothing matters anymore.
Yeah, I could hear that. Dylan for most all of us, we're all descendants, as he was of Woody and those guys. When I started to write that song, I even thought maybe it's a little too Dylan-y, but I decided just to. I love him, and a nod to him is fine by me, and I really like how that song came out.
And who's playing the violin on it?
That's Matt Davidson, who goes by Twain for his music, and he's become a brother of mine and plays in my band for the last few years, but he plays with Big Thief, he plays with a bunch of folks out there, and his own music is incredible. I think he's one of the best. The best that I have heard. So Twain, for anybody that might want to check him out.
Gotcha. And you say you don't have a TV, but did you watch the Super Bowl? I know it's a big deal.
I did not watch it. I was on a little road trip, and when I got home, I tried to figure out how to stream it, which I couldn't figure out until somebody told me that you could stream it on Twitter. And by the time I figured that out, the game was kind of a blowout, and so I missed it, but that's okay. I'm an Eagles fan. I haven't lived in the Philadelphia area for a long time, but I still root for those teams. So.
There you go. Well, that's the way it works.
Yeah.
I'm still a Yankee fan myself.
Well, we could still be friends.
Very good. Okay. Well, thank you very much for spending some time with me today and talking about the stuff. And hope everything goes well. Hopefully you'll be able to do some gigs soon and get out there amongst the fans. That would be great. And come down here sometime. We'd love to have you.
I would love it. And thanks for my first ever New Zealand interview.
Sorry, I
It's a
couldn't come
pleasure.
up with an accent. You don't want to hear me
No,
fake
no, this was great.
All right.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Be well. Thanks.
Bye-bye.